Good morning and good afternoon, race fans, and welcome back to TRTN for round 6 of the HCCL GT4 Challenge. As always, I am Regan Clark. You join us as we head into the final 3 rounds of the championship from the historic Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Ittino Ferrari, otherwise going by Imola. Founded some 72 years ago in 1953, the Imola circuit has seen racing of all shapes and sizes. In the modern day, it's comprised of just over 3 miles and 19 turns of FIA Grade 1. The former home of the San Marino turned Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, with its most recent contract in Formula 1 wrapping up this very year in 2025. Imola sets a unique pattern amongst its contemporaries in the Italian racing market, one of 3 available circuits in ACC, alongside Monza and Misano. Right now, we're watching on board with Gabriele Diada on his way down towards turn 7, 222 with Alpine. It's looking to be a very exciting final quarter of the championship, looking at where we're at on the calendar as we see, actually imminent troubles there for Diada in the 222. We'll have to cut away from him. We'll get on board with the man now leading the championship. More on that in a moment's time. But looking at where we're at on the calendar, of course, we're heading into those final 3 rounds. Now, this is where it is going to be absolutely vital, given how close the championship is at this stage. You'd have thought there'd been a wider divide, but no, top 3 divided by just 20 points. After this race today, we'll be at the Hungaroring for the penultimate round of the championship, crowning everything off in Austria at the Red Bull Ring. Looking at where we're at in the championship then, and the man on screen leads this championship by a minuscule 7-point gap. Christian Lebay, after his 2nd consecutive victory in this championship, usurps the lead from Vladislav Mizin. A 7-point gap between the two. Asahi Ota only divided from the rest of that field by a minuscule 13 points. Flitzer-Flop 4th place with 84 points. And Manuel Verzi in 5th with 72. Matthew Copsey in 6th place with 64 points. Anthony Valorio now up from 8th to 7th with 59 points ahead and 4 points ahead of Stephen Sutton in 8th position. Timo de Tosto in 9th, and rounding out the top 10, coming back into the top 10 after a brief hiatus, is Cam Walker with 45 points in the championship. So we're on board with Christian Lebay, getting a look as to where the schedule is concerned for today. 20 minutes of free practice, 20 minutes of qualifying, and 60 minutes of racing like always. 1 mandatory pit stop for fuel and tyres. Getting a look at the weather, it's going to be nice and dry and predictable conditions here in a bright and sunny Emilia-Romagna. So getting into the discussion post-haste here for balance of performance today, and it's looking to be a hefty assortment for all but one manufacturer, being Aston Martin, the only of this bunch in the negatives, with 10 kilos shed from the V8 Vantage. Then looking into the positives, a minuscule change for Ginetta there, G55 gaining a single kilo. So for Tom Wells, not particularly the worst bit of news to be hearing at this time, especially given that Ginetta in the last 2 rounds were on the far end for weight gain, or were dead neutral. Chevrolet then back into the more nuanced changes, 8 kilos taken away from the Camaro. Now this is as opposed to last round where they had weight taken away from them. So 8 kilos back onto the Camaro here means that Lebay will see a little bit of a change in terms of the overall performance and stability of his 119. Looking into the more extremes here, we've got Mercedes and BMW, 13 and 18 kilos, and then into our hefty trio, McLaren, Porsche and Alpine, 20, 22 and 25 kilos. For Alpine, given that they're among the featherweight class in GT4 alongside the Ginetta G55 and the Porsche 718 Cayman, this doesn't seem like too bad of a change. For McLaren, however, given that their major strength has been their manoeuvrability this season, this is really going to be quite a heavy hit for both Flitzer-Flop and for Anthony Valorio, 2 of the sort of shining stars in this championship for McLaren and their 570S. Speaking of Flitzer-Flop, he was 3rd place last round in Zolder. We'll be looking for more podiums before the season wraps up. So let's get a look around the field, as we do actually have one more bit of news to cover, and that is, of course, of one new driver for round 6, Elias Federico de Sabato, hailing from Argentina in the number 10 BMW M4. Let's see if we can go and find him. And there he is in the pit lane. So this will be his debut round here, round 6 of the championship. And there is Elias Federico de Sabato in his BMW. Was looking relatively high hopes in the pre-race practice session, so a lot more to follow in the next 14 minutes. We saw him drop off of his air jacks there, so we could be seeing him out on track. New look then for Tom Wells in the 818 Ginetta. Get a look at that. Those are golf colours had ever I seen him. The 818 sporting a magnificent retro livery on his way down towards the Variante Villeneuve. turns 5 and 6. We'll get a full rundown of the track in a moment's time. We'll be catching back on board with the 119, next car to start their flying lap. Actually, as I say that, we do have, looking here, that is Elias Federico de Sabato making his way out of the pit lane. So we will follow on board with him for his outlap here for a tour of this magnificent circuit. Making our way then down towards turns 2, 3 and 4. The Variante Tambirello was brought on by a rapid redesign after one of motorsports' most tragic events, the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix. Ever since that fated day, that whole of Sector 1 has been functionally redesigned to be a lot lower speed. On his way now out through Variante Villeneuve down towards Tosa, where we briefly just saw Wells. We follow a very measured outlap here by Elias Federico de Sabato, taking things nice and easy, breaking the car in. Bringing back up that balance of performance, of course, with every reason to. BMW are not going to be feeling their best coming into this round. 18 kilos, so for both him and for Cam Walker, who now finds his way to the top 10 in the championship. There's going to be a lot riding on the line here, especially as that championship starts to draw itself to a close. Up front, though, really a lot of eyes are going to be on the big three. Lebay, Mizin and Ota, where we do expect to see them up towards the front of the field. We'll get on to the discussion of those qualifying predictions a little later down at the line. We stay on board here with de Sabato. Now on his way out through the Variante Alta. Saw him earlier make his way through Acqua Minerale, turns 11, 12 and 13. Now on his way down towards Ravazza. Now this is a major overtaking spot. In several different disciplines have we seen this to be the case. Heavy braking zone here, make or break really for a lot of these drivers. Do keep a very close eye on some of the Porsches competing in the championship. They've got phenomenal braking down into sections like this. So on board with de Sabato, I should say, as he begins his flying lap. In through turn 1. Now we get to see roughly what it's going to look like at full steam here for BMW. Onto the brakes and down into the Variante Tambirello. Taking things nice and easy here for the opening flying laps. Just sort of measuring how the car's going to be feeling. Not only under qualifying trim in about 12 minutes time, but also under that full racing load. On his way down in towards the Variante Villeneuve. That 18 kilos has not been kind to BMW. You can see the understeer start to pile on here for de Sabato. So on his way down through Tosa at turn 7. Also a major overtaking opportunity, so keep a very close eye on that area. We'll be trying to get all of the coverage down through Sector 1 into Sector 2, make our way uphill towards turn 8, and now at turn 9 at Piratella coming up here. This curve to the left, but a little bit of a shake for the number 10. He is seemingly trying to find his footing on his way out through turn 10. The exit of turn 9 through turn 10. Now into turns 11, 12 and 13. The Acqua Minerale, very easy for the car to step away, even for the upper classes, say at GT3. So for the GT4s, they're really going to be up against it. We've seen in even lower divisions such as this, for example, Clio Cups, very easy to have the car step away from you in that area. You're turning and you're braking. That is a recipe for disaster. Out through the Variante Alta then, on his way down towards turns 16, 17 and 18 at Ravazza. It's definitely a little bit more of a leisurely drive here. He is starting to work around the 18 kilo deficit placed on the M4 coming into this round. Now on his way down towards turn 18. Turn 19, a slight kink to the right coming up here to bring him to the end of this flying lap. So we'll see what it is for Elias Federico de Sabato on his opening flying lap in free practice with 10.5 minutes left to go. The number 10 down towards the line. Crosses the line at 152.780. That's 5th fastest in the session so far. Looking up front, it was also an invalid lap. So the only 2 valid times on the charts right now come out of both of the Maloir racing cars on the front row. Christian Lebay and Timo de Tosto, the 119 and the 58. We can also see out on track as well at the moment is Gabriele Deada in the 222. Was set to make his debut in the last round, but that Alpine has really been biting him back over the course of this session. That is not the first time we've seen him step away. We saw that down at Tosa not too long ago at the start of this broadcast. So is there going to be this major teething issue for Alpine over the course of these latter stages of the championship? Now, we've seen plenty of drivers come through and work their way through the mix to give pretty solid credence to Alpine. I mean, Martin Martinet is one name that springs to mind. Another one being Alberto Aragoneses. That was over in Snetterton, a really standout performance by him there. Sadly, it was a DNF at the end of the day in Snet, but he had a remarkable qualifying session The Alpine is definitely a competitive car, but much like the another rear-engine car, as a matter of fact, the Porsche 911 992 up in GT3, it is a polarizing experience. It is really love it or hate it for a lot of drivers. We now see a new time onto the charts. Tom Wells, second fastest, and he's immediately pushed down by Anthony Villorio, back sporting the colours of the high-caliber racing team. Of course, last time we saw him was over on the HCCL Pro Series, where he, alongside several others like Flitzer Flop and Matthew Copsey, competed right here in Imola. Next to the line, though, comes the number 10. So we'll get back on board with Elias Federico de Sabato, the new driver on the block here. Can he look to impress? Right fifth. De Sabato up to fourth, pushes Di Tosto down to fifth, and right down to sixth there. So for Wright, who's quite quickly making a name for himself here, the American in the 54 has had a pretty solid, albeit late, entry to the championship. 6th and 7th on his last 2 race appearances. We see on board here with the Porsche on his way down towards Piratella. Currently 6th, but he's 3.1 seconds off the beat. He was 6th, is now down to 7th. That's courtesy of Flitzer Flop. Now, despite the advances against McLaren in the BOP listings for today, it has not deterred Villorio or Flop from putting both of the current competitive McLarens on the 2 other steps of that podium. But it seems all but dominant for Chevrolet. The only Chevy left in the championship as it stands right now. Christian Lebay, fastest with a 153.42. But we must bear in mind, of course, this is only free practice. We also see now up to second goes Asahi Ota, 628 thousandths of a second from the leading Chevrolet. Also do see in the session as well, albeit yet to have made an appearance on track, Vladislav Mizin. He's 7 points off of the car to his right-hand side, to our left-hand side on the cameras here. That being Christian Lebay. Those two divided by such a small gap. And when you consider the scorings for this championship, looking at the scoring process, it's about 5 points in difference between the top 2, then 4 points between second and third, 3 points between third and fourth, and then 3 points again between fourth and fifth, 2 points between fifth and sixth. So the spread is at its largest up at the front, meaning both of these drivers will be feverishly clawing to be on that top step. There's no tactics to be played here in deliberately taking a step down, really, and then finishing second, knowing you can still be in the championship fight. With the gap this close, and with the championship only consistent of 3 more rounds, today being one of them, it is absolutely vital now for Vladislav Mizin to regain his 2-race-long drought of race wins. Looking at those previous wins then over the course of the championship, you can see that above the opening entry in Monza for Asahi Ota, it has been a measured and controlled championship on all fronts by only 2 drivers, Mizin and Lebay, the only 2 on this grid right now to have taken multiple race wins this season. Let's not rule Asahi Ota out of it. We know that Italian tracks are his bread and butter. Case in point, back at Monza in the wet and wild conditions of the season opener, he was able to go toe-to-toe and then triumph over Christian Lebay in the 119 Chevrolet. So there is definitely great chances today for the Japanese talent to come through and make his 2nd race win of the season. Would definitely bring him back up into the standings for the championship. He's 13 points off of Vladislav Mizin, 20 points off of Christian Lebay. So still very, very tight up in that top 3. That is really going to be either which way for either Chevrolet, Mercedes or Aston Martin by the end of this season. We've also been told of some potential future projects, so we won't delve into too much here. But we are looking to continue our work alongside HCCL coming into the Christmas season. Do keep a close ear to the ground on the information of some brand new events on the horizon. Namely, one of those rounds will be featuring the GT4s, of which we have come to love so dearly here on TRTN. And see in chat there as well as Axel Cassier wishing Lebay the best of luck, and really, by the looks of it, he's going to need every bit of it. He leads the championship by 7 points ahead of Vladislav Mizin. Right now is only ahead of Asahi Ota by 0.6 of a second. Now, this seems pretty textbook for Lebay. This is something he's strived towards, this level of consistency of being well over half a second ahead of the field. Come race time, we'll see that all bets are really off and all of the gloves will be coming flying off of these drivers when we go racing for an hour here in Imola. Now, the only driver yet to have set times. We saw him cooling down for the start of his flying lap, which he is now on his way through the Variante Tamburello, and that's Vladislav Mizin. About 4 minutes 27 seconds left to go before the start of qualifying today. Question remains, can Mizin put himself back on pole position? His way down through Piratella. Will stay on board then with Vladislav Mizin for the duration of this flying lap. Of course, 2 race wins, and he has proven himself to be a fierce force in this championship. A late entry, mind you, as well. I believe made his debut at round 2 of the championship to a victory, so that is really nothing to scoff at there for the number 1. He started on the back foot, briefly led the championship. Right now, still very much so within a chance of retaking it on this very round. All it would take is any amount of calamity for Christian Lebay, and we've seen that these races can prove to be a real mixed bag for all drivers over the course of this season. Nothing is up to chance here. On his way down through Ravazza. Right now, the fastest time, a 1:53.42. Nearest car to him being 628 thousandths of a second away, being Asahi Ota. Can Mizin take second? Moreover, can he take first? On his way to the line then for the first of what seems to be his legitimate flying laps here in the end of free practice. He's second fastest and by a single 1/10 of a second from pole. This is set to be a heated qualifying session. The data may not indicate as such, but we'll have a look at it in a moment's time when we get on to the discussion of qualifying. 20 minutes against the clock coming up in about, looking at it here, 2 minutes and 47 seconds. But for Mizin already, that is a raring start. Wait until the very end of free practice here to get out on track, and now sets in a time good enough for second, with definite upward momentum to suggest that he can take more than a 1/10 away and go up to the fastest time of the session. We'll catch up with him towards the end of this flying lap. Let's next catch on board, though, with the 58 of Timo Tosta. We've seen him to be a serious, reputable talent over the course of the season with Aston Martin. Right now resides in 8th place. Behind him, the 119 on his way to the line. Will it be an extension over his fastest for Christian Lebay? He crosses the line. Sadly, not this time around. Right behind him, the 818 of Tom Wells resides inside that middle of the top 10 bracket there. He's just behind Flitzerflop, outside of the top 5, but he finds himself 800ths of a second up the road from the new driver on the block, Elias Federico de Sabato, in the number 10. I must say, that is some serious guts there from Tom Wells. He started the season off, originally was set to race with Maserati, moved across to Ginetta, and he's really stuck by his guns over the course of this season. He is a frequent flyer of the top 10 in the championship standings, and it is really against all odds to put that Ginetta in the position that it's in amongst cars of that variety. I mean, look, the car behind him there, that's a McLaren 570S. I mean, on the road, that car makes north of 500, even 600 brake horsepower. That Ginetta, it's plucking around the track with a 3.7 litre Ford Cyclone V6 engine. It's got about the same gear ratio as a Rally 2 car. I mean, it is really standing head and shoulders alongside its contemporaries here, massively out of its element. That's a cup racer, I should remind you as well. It started its life out as a single-make cup racer car developed by Ginetta Cars in Leeds. But as it turns out, it wasn't too far off the regulations for GT4, and that's where we find it today. A remarkable stand against the rest of that field. You can see, though, he has not shown any signs of slowing down. It is a very brisk flying lap right now from the 818, so on his way out through Ravazza. Can Tom Wells make his way to the top 5? Moreover, can he make an improvement over his personal fastest? Behind him there is Flitzerflop in the 979, the man he's trying to beat to the top 5 before the start of qualifying today. On his way to the line then goes Tom Wells, where we have seen an extension over the fastest by Lebay. We've not seen an extension on Wells' own fastest. He still remains behind Flitzerflop. Very high hopes then for Wells coming into these final 3 rounds of the championship. It's a 4-car train here right at the end of free practice. The 818, the 979, the 222, and the 55. The 55 just dropping out and away there, that being Asahi Ota coming to a stop after the Variante Tamburello. So we'll get a look at the car at the back of this 3-car pack on his way down towards Tosa. It's Gabriele Diada in the Alpine 222. And he has had some serious stability struggles over the course of this free practice session, but we have been able to see that he's starting to nail things in here. He does find himself 8th fastest, up and ahead of the two Aston Martins of De Tosto and Diaz. And just outside of that top 10 as well, because he Wright and Walker. So real struggle for Porsche today. I was not expecting them to be the manufacturer most up against it under the balance of performance for today. I was really expecting it out of Alpine, but Diada has very quickly sorted out a lot of the major issues with the A110, and he has put it 8th fastest, and dare I say it, not too far away from being 7th, up alongside the number 10 of Elias Federico de Sabato. Getting a look on board with Wells once again among the final drivers here toward the line before the end of free practice and on to 20 minutes of qualifying. And it's going to be an exciting one today here in round 6. Pulling into the pits there, we saw Flitzer flop. The 222 of Diada follow suit. The 818 down towards the line. Would it have been an improvement from him there? We'll have a look in a moment's time. Moreover, we're on to 20 minutes of qualifying. So let's actually look here at the end of free practice. Was it enough for the little Ginetta? Sadly, not that time around for Wells, but he definitely gave it a lot of fighting spirit there all the way to the end of free practice. But here comes the real sort of main show of today besides the race itself. This is, of course, the start of qualifying. 20 minutes against the clock here in Imola. We're on board with the car leading the paddock out towards the Variante Tamburello. It's Christian Lebay in the 119 Chevrolet. It's been a dominant figure of the championship so far, now leads it up and ahead of Vladislav Mizin. On to the discussion of qualifying predictions for today. And Lebay finds himself atop the timing charts by just under 0.3 of a second ahead of Vladislav Mizin in second place. Asahi Ota in third, and Anthony Valorio looks to line up on the second row, only a 10th away. Actually, less than a 10th away if you want to take a look at it there. That is actually 75 thousandths of a second between himself and Asahi Ota. Very, very close margin there on the second row. Elias Federico de Sabato, on his first qualifying session coming up, is predicted at a top 5 appearance. A 152.267 puts himself ahead of Carlos Diaz in 6th place, Wright in 7th, Diada in 8th, and Walker in 9th. Sadly, no current suggestion at a top 10, but with 11 cars currently in competition for today's race, 12 cars, dare I say it, actually, there is still plenty of chances to see more positions gained and lost. We're on board with Lebay on his way out through the Variante Alta. We'll be following on board with the Canadian in the 119 over the course of what is going to be the first flying lap of today. That'll give us our benchmark to go by for the rest of qualifying. Looking back to the balance of performance, of course, Chevrolet, especially when put up against Mercedes, BMW, McLaren, Porsche and Alpine, are really not going to be feeling the gross effects of the 8 kilos slapped on top of the Camaro. So on his way to the line, we'll get on board with Lebay for a lap here of the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo E. Dino Ferrari. Starting things off then, and the Camaro is functionally one of the fastest cars in a straight line. So from that run out of turn 18 down towards turn 2 here at the Variante Tamburello, do expect to see a lot of ground gained or opened for Christian Lebay. As the only Chevrolet in the championship, of course, we saw appearances last round, I believe, from Dion Helge-Leon, also competing with Chevrolet. Down towards the Variante Villeneuve, you can see in the distance there, that's right in the 54, making his way out onto the track. The next valid time coming in supposedly from Cam Walker. So we'll be looking toward the BMW after the Chevrolet here for the flying lap on your screens at the moment. Sadly, the telemetry not giving us much in the way of what the lap time is looking like, as it's ran over from the flying lap, so we'll have to wait for the charts to reveal all of our answers. On his way out through Piratella, down towards the Acqua Minerale. Now, this is a section you would have expected the Chevrolet to have a little bit of struggles with, given that it is definitely on the heftier side by just design alone. But the folks at Pratt Miller Engineering have done absolute witchcraft to keep that Chevy as competitive as ever. It may be a muscle car, but it handles like European sports finesse. So you keep a very close eye on that one. Up on 2 wheels past the exit of the Variante Alta. Could that have been one to invalidate the times there? That was quite a large cut on his way out through turn 14. Down towards Ravazza then. So Bringing up the timing charts to our left-hand side for Christian Lebay will be our benchmark time, given if it was a valid lap there. Let's see if that was the truth. On his way down towards the line, the 119 set to become the first of our times today. Then we'll be looking over to the 24 of Cam Walker. So to the line goes Lebay at 150.725, getting on board with Cam Walker as the next to the line. But we can see the 54 is up the road. We'll see whether or not Wright does set a valid time there. Not the case. So on board with the 24 of Cam Walker. As Wright starts their flying lap, Cam Walker finishes his first, and he's 2 seconds off the mark there. The 222 next to the line, that's Gabriele Diada. We'll see if it was a valid time for the Alpine. Not the case. The 818 follows in his wake there, up to third, and that's Tom Wells. Then right behind him, Flitzer flopped to second fastest in the number 979 McLaren. Next to the line on valid times here, the 55 of Asahi Ota in the Aston Martin V8 Vantage. 15 minutes left to go. He takes the fastest time by 98 thousandths of a second. So great hustle for the start of qualifying by the 55. Asahi Ota. Next to the line, the number 1, Vladislav Mizin, set to start another flying lap, and he has crowned off his first there by going a 10th up on Asahi Ota. Then the 41 to the line, so here comes Anthony Valorio, and he's 4th fastest as he crosses the line. He's ahead of his fellow McLaren there, Flitzer flop in the 979. Moreover, he's within touching distance here of that top 3. He's on that second row. He's only 295 thousandths of a second away from Christian Lebay. It's just under half a second from the fastest time there. We're looking currently at 5 cars divided by less than a second. 58 next to the line comes Timo de Tosto with Aston Martin. It's already been a series of highs here for Aston Martin. Asahi Ota paving the way for Aston Martin's continued success in this championship. De Tosto gets closer to a chance of a top 5, but we can see he was 2 seconds off the beat there. Something seriously wrong for De Tosto over the course of that last lap. The 119 next to the line needs 2 tenths for pole position over Vladislav Mizin. Needs 98 thousandths for second place, but he does more than enough to put himself back on pole. Makes a quite substantial 325 thousandth of a second gap in that last lap just gone. Puts himself 125 thousandths of a second up the road from Mizin. Ota remains in third. Next to the line comes the 222, Gabriele Diada on another flying lap, but it appears to be one that was invalidated for the 222. So continued frustrations. Wells up to 7th, Flop up to 4th in that last spur of times. Then coming to the line, the new driver on the block, Elias Federico de Sabato in the number 10, 8th fastest, and 3 tenths up the road from his fellow BMW Cam Walker in the 24. So a great start for the number 10. Now is the case of whether or not you can find continuous improvement. Next to the line comes Vladislav Mizin. We've already seen him onto pole position at 125 thousandths of a second, keeping him away from it as we see him to the line here. Will it be back to pole for Mizin? Not this time around. 41 next to the line. Let's see if Anthony Valorio can usurp his fellow McLaren on his way to the line. Also, not this time around. You'll be hearing that phrase quite a lot over the course of qualifying today, as Imola is sort of one of those circuits that you can only really get the best performance out of the car in the opening 3 or 4 laps, and then it plateaus very, very quickly. It's a pretty common pattern we've seen even all the way up in the top echelons of console sim racing when we covered the opening round of the HCCL Pro Series. You can find that on our Twitch and on our YouTube channel. And that was a very similar story there. Drivers struggling to find even thousandths of a second of an improvement because this track is so technical and is so demanding on car and driver alike that it can often cause this little bit of qualifying fatigue we see. And as we head towards that halfway mark, Timo de Tosto's in 9th. Only a couple hundredths there away from Elias Federico de Sabato in 8th place. Next to the line went the 32. That's Carlos Diaz onto a flying lap. We'll catch on board with the 54, that being Wright on his way to the line. Can he breach a top 5 ahead of Valorio? Sadly, not this time around. The 818, only a few tenths of a second here from Wright in front of him, but you've got to pay attention to the gap behind him. That was, looking at it here, about 8 thousandths of a second, but Wells says, no thank you. I don't just want 6th, I want 5th as well. Into the top 5 then, in the plucky little Ginetta. Now, we have seen on very rare occasions Ginetta can come through and take pole positions. I think one quite poignant story that springs to mind here was right here at the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Igino Ferrari, and it was for the NLRL Solo Multi-Class Endurance Championship. Roman Shtanov, actually, no, not Roman Shtanov, Dmitry Snai, that's my mistake there. Dmitry Snai was able to take pole position in a Ginetta. Can you believe that? That was in the GT4 category as well. So Wells definitely has the makings of a drive like that. We can see the enthusiasm. We can see the commitment. Moreover, we can definitely see the drive out of him there. He's just squeezed out of the top 5 by Anthony Valorio. There is still plenty of fighting chances there for the 818 by the end of this season. He does slide his way, though, Anthony Valorio, over the Variante Tamburello. So that's an invalid lap head over IC. On the 979 of Flitzer Flop. Currently ahead of him after that last lap by 18 thousandths of a second. It's incredibly thin when you start to consider the gaps behind Christian Lebay, who has massively opened the floodgates here to a 3/10 lead over Vladislav Mizin. Then you got to look behind him there, a tenth and 2 thousandths between Mizin and Ota. Then from Ota to Flop, it's 5 thousandths of a second. Then 18 thousandths between Flop and Valorio. So very, very tight spread here in the top 5 when you remove the very obvious American elephant in the room being the Chevrolet of Christian Lebay. 10 minutes left to go. We're at the halfway mark for qualifying today. We'll be getting on board but next with the 222. So it seems better late than never here for Gabriele Diada in the 222 Alpine. Finally on a valid flying lap. Let's see what he can do. After 3 runs back-to-back here, he's 10th and ahead of Cam Walker by 0.2 of a second. Driver we've still yet to see times out of. Currently on his way down through Tosa, it's Carlos Diaz with Aston Martin. Right now, prophecy fulfilling itself here as we're seeing Lebay, Mizin and Ota, as it was predicted there on the qualifying predictions taken earlier on this morning. Does have it play out very, very close to the chest here. In fact, we're only looking at it here about 120 thousandths of a second from it being exactly on the mark for Christian Lebay. Next to the line goes Vladislav Mizin. Needs 343 thousandths of a second. Isn't going to find that on the last lap as he now enters his flying laps. 9 minutes left to go, so still plenty of chances to retake pole position. But with the gap this grand between that front row, chances are starting to slim here for the number 1. You can see it mount in the way of frustration on his way over through the Variante Tamburello, trying to find even an extra available inch on either side of it per corner to give himself that leading edge. You can see just how close he trims those lines on his way through the Variante Villeneuve. Dare I say it, I'm pretty sure he had all 4 wheels off the track at one point. If the game considers it valid, who are we to question? 32 next to the line then, so we'll see to the line Carlos Diaz to put his first time on the charts here. Will he go up ahead of Cam Walker and Gabriele Diada as he makes his way to the line and remains in 12th place there? He's off by 0.3 of a second, a little under actually 0.3 of a second from Cam Walker. Next on a valid flying lap right now is the 55 of Asahi Ota. We'll get back on board with the Aston Martin, of course winner of that opening round of the championship, 3rd overall in the GT4 challenge as it stands. On his way down to the line then, Asahi Ota in the 55 needs 445 thousandths of a second for pole position. And he does make an improvement, now puts himself within 200ths of a second of Vladislav Mizin. So that front row lockout could be coming in the way of Aston Martin in a moment's time. The real question is, what is the rebuttal by the number 1? Mizin appears to be on an invalid flying lap, and given how liberally he was taking the track limits in the opening sector, I would not be too surprised if that is the case. On his way out through turn 19, down towards the line at the end of this flying lap, 7 minutes 25 left to go in qualifying. Here comes Mizin. And as it stands, that was, yes, an invalid lap, so no improvements to be found on the timing charts for the number 1 Mercedes. Number 10 next on a valid flying lap. Elias Federico de Sabato in the number 10 BMW. In front of him there, you can see that's Timo de Tosto in the 58 Aston Martin peeling into the pit lanes. So, Sabato to the line. Argentinian in the BMW stays 9th there after his last flying lap. Doesn't find the room to improve over Timo de Tosto. Now, bear in mind, they're less than 1/10 of a second from one another as it stands. So there's still plenty of opportunities for the number 10 by the end of this qualifying session. Next down to the line then comes Asahi Ota. Looking at it there, he was able to find significant improvement over the course of that last flying lap. But with this one coming, couldn't find the 200ths necessary for second place over Vladislav Mizin. Bear in mind, 6 minutes left to go, so one more stint definitely still on the charts here for Asahi Ota. You see Vladislav Mizin on his way out of the Variante Alta, but seemingly slowing down on his run down towards the Ravazza section here. Turns 16, 17 and 18. Something is clearly awry with Vladislav Mizin. Perhaps a little bit of head loss in any attempt here to try and find his way up towards the leading time, or 150.177 for Christian Lebay in the 119 Chevrolet. So we'll cut away from Mizin as we see the next driver to the line here being given inadvertently a little bit of free tow by the number 54 of Wright. In front of him is Flitzer Flop with McLaren. Across the line, sadly to no improvement, but McLaren creeping ever closer to a podium start there. The gap between himself and Asahi Ota in the factors of about, looking at it here, about 80, I want to say about 87 thousandths of a second thereabouts. So very, very close stuff between the 55 and the 979. Closer still are the gaps between himself and his fellow McLaren at the back of that top 5, Anthony Valorio. They find themselves separated by 18 thousandths of a second, and that has been quite a persistent 18 thousandths of a second over the course of this qualifying session today. We've not been able to shake each other off here over the course of quali. 4.5 minutes left to go. Flop's still out on track. Valorio at this time making his way down towards Ravazza to start another flying lap. Next to the line then comes Christian Lebay, his final stint in qualifying before the race comes up later on today. 4 minutes left to go. Currently leads the session by 348 thousandths of a second. That's 3 tenths, 400ths and 8 thousandths. 150.177 to beat. He's next to the line. Will he make an improvement into the very low 150s, or even, dare I say, into the super high 149s? Is it even possible at this time for the 119? To the line he goes. No improvement over the course of that last lap, but with plenty more on the horizon, functionally looking at about 2 to 3 more laps before the end of today's session. There is still the chances for an improvement out of that 119. It's been on solid form over the course of qualifying today. 54 next to the line on a valid flying lap. Out through Ravazza at this time is Wright in the Porsche 718 Cayman. Swinging high out of turn 19 to give himself the better run into the next flying lap here through turn 1. He remains in 7th after that last lap. No improvement of position. Number 10 next to the line. Elias Federico de Sabato, not too far away, mind you, and does get ahead of Wright. Better late than never. The gap sitting between them was, I think it was about 5 thousandths of a second. 5 to, I think it was 5 to 10 thousandths in that range. But now de Sabato up to 7th, leads by 2 tenths. The 818 next to the line. It has been a real breakout story today here for Tom Wells in the Ginetta. The only Ginetta left in this championship was, looking at it here, one of 2. The other being Gonzalez, who was registered to enter with Ginetta, but sadly I don't believe it ever made an appearance. So Tom Wells, as the sole representative of Ginetta cars, has really shone over the course of this season. And analysing his results over the course of the last couple of rounds reveals pretty solid visits to the top 10 here. His best result this season was actually at the debut in the wet conditions over at Monza, where he finished 7th. Missed out on a result at round 2, 13th in the race thereafter, but ever since it's been consistently 10th or higher for the 818. Could it be the day then that he finds his new best result? Right now, of course, that best result was 7th. He finds himself currently 6th, could drop a position to de Sabato and Wright, knowing how poor the starts are for Ginetta. But with how maneuverability intensive a track like Imola is, you could definitely find plenty of opportunities for great battles in the race coming up. So keep a very close eye on the 818 over the course of today's race. That could be one to watch. Keeping an eye also up towards our front row, as we now see Vladislav Mizin has been replaced by Anthony Valorio. The gap 200ths of a second between the McLaren and the Mercedes. Asahi Ota not too far away from them either, by about 75 thousandths of a second. So very, very close stuff inside of that top 4. Moreover, into that top 5. All 5 of these drivers are divided by less than half of a second. So this is very, very airtight here between Flop, Ota, Mizin, Valorio and Labay. 1 minute left to go, so amongst the final flying laps we'll see today. Next to the line for his final flying lap here in Imola is Tom Wells. To have put himself within a second of the fastest time, I'd say that's still a great achievement, given the fact that car is definitely, as I mentioned before, it's a little bit out of its depth. It is not originally designed for GT4 racing. It's found its way in by circumstance. It was a cup racer at the beginning of its life, the Ginetta G55. Sort of reminds me as if, you know, what if you slapped a big rear wing and a decently upsized engine on a Mazda MX-5 and sent it into SRO GT4. I imagine you would end up with a car not too dissimilar from the Ginetta G55. 979 next to the line. Here comes Flitzer Flop with McLaren. They've been against it all of this session on balance of performance, but Valorio puts himself second fastest. Flop to the line at the very, very end of qualifying, finds just enough time for one more flying lap. So Flop still has one more card to play here. 32 next to the line comes Carlos Diaz. Does he go up and ahead of Cam Walker? He does find improvements, but not enough at this time. Needed about 120 thousandths of a second to put himself in 11th place. The 54 next to the line comes right with Porsche. Can he get back up and ahead of De Sabato's BMW on his way to the line? Sadly, not this time around. Finds himself only 200ths of a second ahead of Timo De Tosto. Had De Tosto one more lap to play, there could have been a chance that the Aston Martin could have seen 8th place. Number 10 peels into the pits. De Sabato satisfied with his opening qualifying performance. The Argentinian finds himself 7th for the end of his opening quali session. The 818 then on his exit of Ravazza has been a real story over the course of quali today, but peeling into the pits on his final chapter, there goes Tom Wells, content with a top 6 start. Blitzer Flop still out on track. He beat the timers by just under a second there. So that was incredible stuff. Right now up on that top 3 right now is Labay, Valorio and Mizin. I believe Ota is on track. We'll see whether or not there's going to be an improvement on the way for the 55. Out through turn 18, peels it into the pits then. He was even polite enough to put the indicators on. That is a very rare thing indeed here in GT4. On his way to the line then, the last car on track. The 979 of Flitzer Flop with McLaren. Can he find both McLarens in the top 2 rows? Right now, they've already satisfied themselves with 2 McLarens in the top 5. What can Flop do then? Ever the ambitious type, but he peels into the pit lane, was leaving us guessing there all the way to the end of qualifying today. He'll be satisfied with a top 5 start. He starts on the 3rd row alongside Tom Wells. More onto that grid in a moment's time, but what an end to qualifying we have today. So, Christian Labay on pole position. To remind you then of the balance of performance for today, and also as far as the championship standings are concerned, Labay still leads coming into this round by now 7 points. He's improved that margin over where things were in Zolder. Vladislav Mizin second with 113 points. Asahi Ota in third with 100 points. Flitzer Flop in fourth with 84. Manuel Vertzi misses out on this round. He'll be looking to drop further behind 5th. And same story for Matthew Copsey, who's in 6th place. Neither of them seeming to appear in this round. Anthony Valorio climbs from 8th to 7th over the course of Zolder, now with 59 points and ahead of Stephen Sutton with 55. He's set to drop positions to Timo De Tosto and Cam Walker, 9th and 10th with 51 points and 45 points. Balance of performance-wise, Aston Martin still best in class with 10 kilos removed. Ginetta with only a single kilo added. Chevrolet with 8 kilos added, and then into the double figures, Mercedes and BMW with 13 and 18. Then into the extremes with McLaren, Porsche and Alpine, 20, 22 and 25 in respect to one another there. It's looking a little bit shocking for some of the more seasoned the more seasoned lightweight cars, I should say, like Alpine and Porsche. Ginetta find themselves on the more pleasant side of things, and we've seen that elevated to great effect in qualifying today by Tom Wells, 6th place in the G55. will be looking on that grid as well for technically their first qualifying appearance as well. A great result for Gabriele Diada in the 222 Alpine. Currently worst against it as well for balance of performance, 25 kilos. More onto that in a moment's time then, as we discuss the grid for round 6 of the championship. Christian Lebay on pole position, and on a surprise final lap flurry there for Anthony Valorio, puts himself second fastest by minuscule gaps and ahead of Vladislav Mizin, who now starts on the second row and alongside Asahi Ota. On the third row then, Flitzerflop and Tom Wells, 5th and 6th. On the fourth row, Elias Federico de Sabato on debut, 7th and ahead of Wright in 8th position. Timo de Tosto in 9th, and Gabriele Diada rounds out the top 10 on the back of that 5th row, 10th place for the Alpine. Then starting on the 6th row, at the front of that 6th row, I should say, 11th place for Cam Walker, and then rounding out a 12-car field here is Carlos Diaz. A good mixture of cars here. I'd not say there's one specific manufacturer dominating the field. We've got decent spreads here from a variety of different groups. I'd say the most numerous of them, it's a joint first between... Actually, no, it's not a joint first. Aston Martin do actually have the most cars on this field, 3 in total, that being Asahi Ota, Timo de Tosto and Carlos Diaz. Then you've got joint second between Mercedes and McLaren and BMW, Anthony Valorio and Flitzerflop for McLaren, Elias Federico de Sabato and Cam Walker for BMW. It's a real far cry from where the grid was at the start of the championship, where it was dominated by Chevrolet and Mercedes. Now is come the case where Aston Martin is the most plentiful on the grid. We can see there furthest up the order for the Astons, Asahi Ota. We were briefly on board with there, but let's get on board with the man starting our formation lap here for round 6 of the championship, Christian Lebay in the 119 Chevrolet, a very present sight throughout this season on that front row. Has been on a recent spur of successful qualifying drives and even more so successful race results with back-to-back race wins in Great Britain and Belgium. And that sort of plays direct comparisons to the car now starting on the road behind him, the number 1 Mercedes of Vladislav Mizin, who dominated the rounds before Lebay's rise to success in this championship. Starting all of it off was that crowning win for Asahi Ota in the 55 Aston, now starts on this field in 4th place. So, of course, to bring back up what the regulations are concerned with for round 6 of the championship, you're looking at 60 minutes of racing, coming up with 1 mandatory pit stop for fuel and tyres. Looking at the weather here, variability at 1%, cloud coverage at 9%, ambient temperature at 19 or above. So nice, warm, dare I say, a bit hot and spicy conditions here in Imola. I say that from the perspective of a Brit. We're not designed to survive over 17 degrees. Out through the Variante Villeneuve on his way down towards Tosa. You can see the field following in the wake here of the 119. And it's going to be a very, very spicy start indeed when you consider Anthony Valorio's string of solid starts throughout the season. Of course, looking over towards the Competizione Performance League, another GT4 championship that we've been covering over the course of the last couple of weeks. We're now on to their chapter with Jaguar, but it was Anthony Valorio who took 2 back-to-back victories at Watkins Glen in the very same McLaren, albeit under different colours. Now lining up right behind the man he had to take those victories off of, that being Christian Lebay. So these two have a long-winded history in GT4, a long-winded history overall in ACC. We've got a lot of experienced drivers who know each other's game here on their way down towards the Acqua Minerale. And just to track here Valorio's results over the course of the championship, he's been on the up and up. He had 2 less than ideal results for the opening 2 rounds, 13th and 20th. But thanks to the drop point system, his 20th position finish in round 2 was dropped away from his overall points contributions. In the last 3 races, he's been a frequent flyer of the top 10, even getting a podium over at round 4 in Snetterton. So we know that the 41 is podium capable and right now starts in one of the best positions on track. He's put himself ahead of the AMG, which he knows he can get the better start off of, and the Chevrolet, of which he can quickly cling to the coattails of on his run down towards the Variante Tamburello. 2 of the fastest cars in GT4 in a straight line there make your front row. That's Chevrolet and McLaren. 2 juggernauts there, side by side. But not much more time in the way of it here as we make our way out of Ravazza. Green flags are given the all clear as we get ready for round 6 of the championship. Now we know already after way too many visits here to Imola that it's actually quite a long crawl to the lines. You'll have to bear with us here as we try and find more words to say. But what else can be said of this championship as we head into the final handful of rounds here in the HCCL GT4 Challenge? It has been a real pleasure from us here on TRTN, but now as we kick off round 6 on our way down towards the line for 12 cars in all, 6 either side of it, leading that charge, the 119, as we make our way down towards the line. Without further ado then, here the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Edino Ferrari for round 6 of the championship. We are green and racing here in Imola. An hour against the clock and a brilliant start by the front row. Vladislav Mizin, though, making up great hustle for the race start. So too, you can see in the background is Flitzer Flop having a great start, putting himself nearly side by side with the Mercedes, but Mizin gets up on the inside of Valorio, so I may have counted out that Mercedes for the considerations of who was going to have the greatest start. Mizin wasting absolutely no time. Meanwhile, you can see that Asahi Ota has dropped behind both of the McLarens down to the back of the top 5. Lebay continues to lead down towards the Variante Villeneuve. Right now, seemingly everyone through the midst of it with very little trouble. Actually, I say that because in the background, that's Elias Federico de Sabato, a huge impact in the background for the number 10. Well, I'm going to keep a very close eye on the fight for the lead of this race because Mizin and Lebay are right alongside one another on their way down towards Piratella as we quickly try to break down what went on in the background. So a slide out for the number 10, then hits Diaz, then gets hit there by Walker, was up on 2 wheels. Back on board with our leading pair down towards Aqua Minerale. It's Lebay v Mizin, then Valorio, then Flop, then Ota for the top 5. May have spoken a little too soon there on the chances of everyone getting through the fray with very little issue. We're on with Lebay on our way down towards the Variante Alta in that fight for the race lead. Very, very close stuff. We're actually going to get a look behind, though, because we can see going on at the same time is a fight for 4th place here between Flitzer Flop and Asahi Ota. Down towards Ravazza. Meanwhile, up on that front row, it's 1.6 seconds away from Flop at this time. 0.2 of a second apart from one another as they go soaring out of Ravazza. Meanwhile, on their tail, look there, that's the 41 of Anthony Valorio. He'll be tucking into a nice healthy dose of slipstream off of that Mercedes. Meanwhile, his teammates at the High Caliber Racing team and fellow McLaren on this field, Flitzer Flop is under attack here by an approaching Asahi Ota for 4th place. They make their way down towards the Variante Tamburello. You can see up the road it has quickly become three in a row here for that fight of the lead of this race. At its closest, separated by 0.3 of a second as they head down towards the Variante Villeneuve. And also see further down the line at this time, Cam Walker looks to be fighting there. I want to say that was with Timo de Tosto, the Aston Martin in the background. Right now out through Tosa, cut away from Flop here. See what's going on with his teammate. Anthony Valorio finds himself a little bit stuck in the middle here. De Sabato into the pit lane, so a less than ideal start for the BMW, but he is into the pits. Could it be a case of a DNF this early on? Let's hope not, especially with 57 minutes of racing left to go in today's race. We see the telemetry here for Anthony Valorio. There is an overall improvement to be had for his fastest in this session so far. But his real objectives, he sets his sights ahead there on the back end of that Mercedes. He's looking to reclaim second. Not only is he looking to reclaim second, he's looking to come and have a go for that race lead. But he's got plenty of other challenges in the way of it there, namely that loss of stability through the Variante Alta. That is going to be a really prevalent issue for McLaren. We know their cars are fantastic in the corners, but are notoriously flaky on the curb. So at a track like Imola, this is really a recipe for disaster for the 570S, the sort of little brother of the 720S. Ironic, given the fact the 570S was inherently born of the 650S, and that was inherently born of the MP4-12C, so technically makes it older than the 720S. And see, though, looks to be battle of the McLarens very, very shortly here for 3rd place. We're on board with Anthony Valorio as Flitzer Flop closes ground at a rate of knots here down towards the Variante Tamburello. You can see up the road that fight still going on. Very, very lively at this time. 0.6 of a second between Mizin and Lebay. We're on board with Anthony Valorio as he looks to swap places perhaps with his fellow McLaren. Flitzer is not waiting for any second chances here. Down towards the Variante Villeneuve. You can see hanging on behind, waiting for his opportunity to strike as the 55 of Asahi Ota. In the background, we can see as well, was a fantastic start for Gabriele Diada because he's in 7th and behind Tom Wells there in that golf-coloured 818 Ginetta. You can see very clear line of sight between the car in 3rd and the leads of this race. They go rocketing down towards the Acqua Minerale. You can see about 2 to 3 car lengths now between the Chevy and the Mercedes. That is definitely not the kind of luxury that Valorio is able to take any credit of at this time, because he is very, very close to having another McLaren right up his backside as he makes his way down towards the Variante Alta. Ooh, it's trouble there for the 979, and I was saying this earlier, McLaren notoriously flaky. So as we cut away from Valorio back to Flop, now fighting for 4th place as Asahi Ota looks to go around the outside down into Ravazza. There's nothing Flop can do there against the advance of the 55. That was smooth sailing for Asahi Ota. He's up to 4th, returning to the position he started today's race from. Much to the frustration for Flitzer Flop, if I had to imagine there. That was a very, very simple mistake, and I don't believe this is the last time we're going to see drivers making these errors over the curbs. These GT4s, I mean, they are pretty much as close as one can feasibly get here to a production car. You wouldn't drive your car over a curb that high. That's where a lot of these drivers seem to be making the same mistake. They get a little too ambitious on what these cars are capable of, but that suspension travel is a lot worse off compared to the more purpose-built platforms over at GT3, where there's a lot more difference, I'd say, between themselves and their road-going counterparts. Looking further down the line, I do want to draw attention to this. It's the battle of the featherweights here, and that's going on right now up the road between Wells and Diada. Diada up to 6th, Wells down to 7th. We'll stay on board, though, with Tom Wells. So there's definitely a lot to be said of this fight. Two brands we're not very used to seeing fight at all over the course of this championship. Ginetta versus Alpine. The A110 versus the G55. Diada runs wide out through Piratella. It allows Wells to stay on his rear quarter on his run down towards the Acqua Minerale. You can see in the background as well, right v Di Tosto in a moment's time. Now out through Acqua Minerale. A bit of a step out there for the 222. It does invite the 818 to come and have a go, and does move up into 6th place. So great stuff for Tom Wells. A great little fight there between the sort of go-karts of GT4, the A110 and the G55. They have invited, however, amongst all of the pushing and shoving, they have invited the advance now in of Diaz and Wright. Di Tosto not too far away. Mistakenly said it was the fight between Wright and Di Tosto. No, Di Tosto is about 2.4 seconds down the road from Wright. It was actually Diaz he was fighting with up in front of him, also in an Aston Martin. Looking here with Asahi Ota, 0.5 of a second from Anthony Valorio, and now, as you can see, disappearing up the road. I mean, blink and you'll miss him. Christian Lebay now over 5 seconds up the road. Actually, sorry, over 3 seconds up the road, nearing 5 seconds from the perspective of Asahi Ota. He has just absolutely vanished, gone with the wind in the 119. So for Vladislav Mizin, he finds himself in a very uncomfortable spot here, knowing that the championship is continuing to swing in favour of the 119. If he can't find any ability to dig deep here for any further times, this could be his goose effectively cooked, knowing 51 minutes still against the clock here and a full run of the pit lane. There'll be effectively 2 halves to this race. Right now, he's quite blatantly losing the first. See the 2 BMWs, Walker and Di Sabato, making their way around Tosa. BMW really up against it in this race, 11th and 12th. It's a down and out result for the M4. See Wright and Diaz getting right up to the back end of Gabriele Diada and the 222 Alpine up in front there. And this was a section of the track he was struggling at before in his fight against Tom Wells. Now as we stay on board with Wright at the back of this 3-car pack, it could be Diaz v Diada in a moment's time. In a moment's time, I should say. On board with Wright. Up through the Variante Alta. Currently, all of that fighting going on for 7th place on the field. As we approach the 10-minute mark, we'll stay on board here with Wright as we recount the rest of the field. LeBay leads, was previously holding on to that fastest time, now taken by Vladislav Mizin in 2nd place. Anthony Valorio 3rd, Asahi Ota in 4th, Flitzer Flop in 5th, Tom Wells in 6th, Gabriele Diada in 7th. Right now is under siege from Carlos Diaz. Wright in 9th position is an onlooker to this fight. We'll see how it folds out between these two, though. Diada defends at the inside on the Variante Tamburello, and really that Alpine is just showing a lot of its problems. Into the wall goes the 222. That was, what, how many snaps was that? Was that one, two, three? 3 snaps there over the back end of the 222. That is heartbreaking stuff for Gabriele Diada. But I suppose fantastic news for Carlos Diaz. He finds himself in 7th place now, ahead of Wright and Di Tosto. 8th and 9th, Diada down to 10th. Walker in 11th, De Sabato in 12th. We saw that incident from earlier on. Out of this section, as a matter of fact, heading in towards Tosa on the exit of the Variante Villeneuve. Looking at the nearest fight on track at the moment, it's Flop Viota for 4th place. I must say, the British machinery in that top 5 has really been standout against the otherwise leading dominance by America and Germany, but it's besides the point, really. Looking at it here, that is incredibly close fighting between 2 staple brands of the British performance industry, McLaren and Aston Martin. And, you know, look even further down, and you have Ginetta as well. So, from the span of 3rd all the way down to 7th is all British machinery. Right now, though, Mizin's opened the taps up for a 1.7 second lead over Valorio. That's since opened up once again to 2.2 seconds at the last recorded interval. Looking at the gap right now for Asahi Ota and Flitzer Flop, it's 0.4 of a second between the 979 and the 55 as they make their way through the Variante Tamburello. It's almost a hypnotic dance to be had here between these three, the 2 McLarens and the Aston, mimicking one another, flowing through these corners. It seems almost effortless for them. Oh my words, there was very, very ambitious by Flitzer Flop. He did hold it, though. I want to give him credit for that one. He did hold it. It was much more intense on his way into Villeneuve. So could that be a lineup for a potential future move here? If he's able to get alongside Asahi Ota, he now knows that the machine is capable of going a lot quicker into Villeneuve than he's been doing so far. At a real pinch of it, he can do something like that, but it's incredibly risky. We'll see if he does do that later on, though. We're on board with Timo de Tosto, now looking up the back end of the 54 of Wright on his way down towards Piratella. Could be Porsche v Aston in a moment's time here for 8th place on track. Now, we're normally used to seeing Timo de Tosto back with Mercedes, the sort of sister car, as it were, for the Aston Martin. Moreover, we've been seeing him more recent times in Chevrolet's quarters, driving the same Camaro that currently leads this race. But to see him with Aston Martin, it's definitely been an ambitious chapter for Timo de Tosto. He does seem relatively comfortable here in and around the top 10. You can still see, though, that he does... you can see it almost in the way that he commands the car around the field. He does want a car that fights a little bit harder through the corners like the Chevrolet does. It can be a little bit loftier on its way through. The Aston is surprisingly spry. It's quite a middle-of-the-road kind of car across both GT4 and GT3. It's a real jack-of-all-trades type of vehicle. And see into the pits as well as Gabriele Diada. We're seeing here with the leading Chevrolet, the 119 of Christian LeBay. Now you can see that the gap between himself and Mizin has dropped away. At its highest, it was in and around 3.6, 3.8 seconds. Now it has since dropped to 2.8 seconds. Mizin having found over the course of the last couple of laps here in and around a second between himself and LeBay. Could that be a precedent being set up for the rest of this stint? Of course, we'll be looking at around 16 more minutes before the bulk of our pit stops in today's race. Of course, that is a gap that can still hover around anywhere from now to about 20 minutes left in this race. We really are quite open-ended for what the strategy is looking like. There's no definitive pit window, but the bulk of drivers do like to split the race down the middle, or at least to as far as they think the car can go under the conditions they're racing in. So it may be a broadly different affair for Lebay and Mizin, who find themselves relatively distant, whereas you can take, for example, drivers like Wright, like Flop, like Ota, like Wells, like Diaz, like Di Tosto, who are all fighting and have been fighting for the bulk of this race so far. And you can definitely draw some comparisons here. Their tyres are going to be cooking a lot quicker than the leading car that's not really got any kind of competition to force it to overdrive, to sort of hang around in the rear of and cook the tyres by not having anywhere near as much cool air, but just dragging in a lot of that extra heat. These three, though, part of that sort of... I don't know whether or not to call it an Aston Martin sandwich or a Porsche sandwich, because technically a sandwich is only defined by its contents, not by the bread. I mean, you don't call a BLT, you don't call it a bread sandwich, do you? I would say functionally it's a Porsche sandwich, but with Aston Martin bread here. Between Diaz, Wright and Di Tosto, they found themselves rather precariously stuck in the swing of it. This could yet change. We do see some trouble over Tamburello, and that is really going to carry all the way over to Tosa here for Wright, and it's giving plenty of opportunities up to Di Tosto, but as he runs wide out through Tamburello, takes a little bit of the grass on the right-hand side, does drop away from that opportunity just as it arrived. Now back onto the nearest fights on track, and it's been one that has been charted over the course of the last 15 minutes between these two here, feverishly fighting over a position on the second row. Flitzer Flop and Asahi Ota. Aston Martin versus McLaren. Now on their way down towards Aqua Minerale. Flop 0.2 of a second away from the 55 up in front. Asahi Ota has been putting on a great defensive performance over the course of the last 17 minutes. Could it come apart here with Flitzer Flop? We know how ambitious he's willing to be on his runs into a position, especially with Ravazza just around the corner here as we exit the Variante Alta. He can stay close enough to that Aston Martin. He knows he's got him pitched in the opening straight. The McLaren is just ever so slightly faster than the Aston in a straight line. This could work very nicely into Flop's hands. We'll see exactly how it plays out on his way in towards Ravazza. Got a little bit later on the brakes, taking the line a little bit more aggressively because he's trying to stay incredibly close. But there, that huge ripple on the suspension after clipping the inside curb, it's knocked him 3 attempts away. More importantly, he's out of that vital area that he would otherwise need to have been in to get up and alongside the Aston Martin. So now he's going to have to do that all over again, and that's the real frustration we find at a track like Imola. And it's the same story we see up in GT3, even though those cars can definitely tank the curbs a lot better than the GT4s, as we saw over on the XCL Pro Series was such a case, but even there they were struggling. But it's the point I illustrated from before. I mean, these are, as far as you or I are concerned, strikingly close to what you can buy off the dealership for. In fact, in some cases, if you were to take a look at, for example, if we can go and find him here, the Porsche of Wright, pretty sure Porsche does sell exactly that straight from the factory. The 718 Cayman Club Sport is a Porsche designed product that you can purchase from Porsche themselves. Moreover, they've made several road-going homologation special counterparts for this, including the 718 GT4. The GT4 RS, if I'm not mistaken, which is a fantastic little motor, incredibly underrated up against the 911 GT3 RS. Funnily enough, McLaren did a very similar thing for the 570S GT4. I believe it was called the 620R, as a matter of fact, which is a sort of from the factory floor race-ready model. It's more track-focused, but definitely owes a lot of its elements to its GT4 career. Now, McLaren has since replaced the 570S with the Artura, which is functionally the same thing with a different face. Now on their way out of Ravazza. Back onto that point just quickly before I forget what the actual reason of bringing all of that up was. These are functionally as close as what one can get to a factory floor car. So getting up and over those monstrously high curbs is a real challenge. And as I said before, you wouldn't want to drive your own car up over a curb like that. So for a lot of these drivers, they've got to wrestle with the thought that they probably shouldn't drive theirs over that either. Definite ambition there from Flitzer Flop. He did try for it. He had the straight line speed, but it was a little too late for him, as it was right as they were going down into the Variante Tamburello, and he's lost a little bit of time. He's now back with the 55 of Asahi Ota. It's sort of a case we're seeing here in that fight for 4th place right now. As the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. We've seen that Flitzer has had a very solid tenure here in the GT4 Challenge. 2 podium appearances over the course of the season. Has not yet finished outside of the top 10. He's a very consistent customer here. And up and against Asahi Ota, you can see they are really very evenly matched. Asahi Ota's best result this season, of course, was the win in the opening round of this championship over on another Italian track over at the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza. His current worst result has been 5th, so that is brutal when you start to think about that. We stay on board here with Flitzer still in the fight for 4th place. I get the feeling we'll be seeing these two absolutely super glued to one another in the next 40 minutes. Having dropped away a little bit though, could this be the time in the next couple of laps for Flitzer to consider an earlier pit stop to try and sort of undercut Asahi Ota's Aston Martin? Knowing that he's definitely got the pace for it, but being stuck, cooped up behind the Aston for so long is having a knock-on effect on the performance of that McLaren. You see, into the pit lane goes Vladislav Mizin. He has now promoted himself to what is the fight of 3rd place, but we can see with the gap being so far away now, 151.217 to a 152.182. Flitzer is having to play second fiddle here for the last of those podium positions. Looking up front, we can see his fellow McLaren and fellow teammate at the High Caliber Racing team, Anthony Valorio, making his way out of the Variante Tamburello and down towards the Variante Villeneuve. But we can see the monstrously large gap that exists now between himself and Christian Lebay. Otherwise, would have been a closer gap to Mizin right now in the pit lane, taking his mandatory pit stop with 38, just under 39 minutes left to go in today's race. So very early doors strategy from the number 1. We've seen that to be quite a consistent factor of his career over the course of the GT4 Challenge. He's been quite the early bird when it comes to the pit lane. 38.5 minutes then left to go in today's race. It's going to be a big day here on TRTN. If you'll be joining us later on, you'll be seeing the opening round of the Console Endurance Series, where I believe we could actually be seeing a few familiar faces on this grid, namely some of the Maloir racing cars set to make their endurance racing debut over at the Circuit Zolder. 6 hours of racing. It's going to be a long haul for us here on TRTN. Do thoroughly look forward to that, though. Right now, it's been a fantastic round so far, and we're not even at the halfway mark here in round 6 of the championship. Getting a look as to where we'll be coming next week. We'll be at that penultimate round of the Hungaroring. I'd say a very underrated circuit on ACC. Gets a lot of its flack because of its existence in Formula 1, in my honest opinion. I think it is a pretty standout venue. Then the Red Bull Ring for the final round of the championship thereafter on November 8th, where we wrap things up here. Heading into November and December, some fun projects on the way, which we're looking to be covering with the folks here at the High Caliber Community League. Namely, involving a certain trip to a certain legendary circuit out in the forests in Germany. More on that as it sort of shows up. 37 minutes then left to go. Lebay 7.8 seconds up the road. Let's get a scope of the entire field here with Mizin now in 9th place. A single DNF in today's race. That was the 222. Actually, there's 2 DNFs. There was the 222 and the 24, I want to say, Cam Walker. So Cam Walker and also the 222 of Gabriele Diada out of this race. We're only 10 cars left here in Imola. A bit of a bloodbath then before the halfway mark. Mizin now down to 9th, but has that fastest lap. We'll be seeing him surge his way back up to the front of this field later on today. You can see Timo de Tosto fighting right now with his fellow Aston Martin, Carlos Diaz, the 32 versus the 58 there on the exit of turn 7. We'll stay on board with them as we recount the current standings at large. Lebay leads from Valorio, Ota in 3rd, Flop 4th, Wells in 5th, Diaz 6th, de Tosto 7th, Wright 8th, Mizin 9th, and De Sabato in 10th. One must consider, though, with Mizin, he has taken that pit stop. So this was a deliberate move to put himself down in 9th place after taking an earlier run to the pits. Will slowly but surely creep his way back up through the field by the end of today's race. Right now, though, we are seeing what looks to be a pretty lively scrap here between the 2 Aston Martins of De Tosto and Diaz. Right now, this is ongoing for 6th place on the field. Question is, as we start to draw in on that vital pit window, sort of that unspoken pit window, more likely, who pulls the trigger first on this fight here? Will it be DeTosto, knowing that overall he's got slightly more pace here on Diaz, or will it be Diaz in his efforts to preserve position? So this is a poignant question amongst these two, as they do find themselves, I'd say, very closely balanced. Some have stronger sections than others. Right now, they've been staying in this almost perfect limbo for position over the course of the last 25 minutes or so. I mean, namely in their battle, it's been the last couple of laps where it's been at this level of intensity. Right now, starting to sort of seep away into the background, there could be the consideration for the 54 to come into the pits and attempt a large-scale undercut, similar to what we're seeing from Vladislav Mizin. As for Wright, I'd say it's definitely been the case that he's fallen behind away from the Aston Martins because the Porsche isn't the greatest under dirty air. It has a pretty bad habit of overcooking itself pretty quickly. It's a high-intensity machine, much like we've seen out of the likes of Alpine and Ginetta, the other featherweight cars of the GT4 class. We can actually see there up the road is one of the Ginettas. Tom Wells up to 5th. Believe, yes, into the pit lanes at this time is Christian Lebay. Now having come into the pits in the 119. Let's get quickly back on board, though, with DeTosto and Diaz, as we could be seeing DeTosto gear himself up for a move here. He's got the run on his way down towards Ravazza. He's going to stay behind, looking up the inside, trying to force Diaz to run wide, and so he does, sweeping his way through. That's textbook mind games from the 58 of Timo DeTosto. Does he consider then to combo that with a pit lane run to preserve position? No, he doesn't. Same story for Diaz and Wright around him. Flitzer Flop now also into the pit lanes as well. That promotes Tom Wells up to 3rd, courtesy of both that and Lebay's pit stop. And looking at where that affects the field right now, Valorio becomes our new race leader here in Imola for the time being as it stands. Following in his wake then is Asahi Ota in 2nd place. Tom Wells promoted to a provisional podium position. Now looking back here with Timo DeTosto has held on to his place ahead of Carlos Diaz. A great little fight between the two Aston Martins as they continue to make their way up the field. Of course, we'll see where that levels itself out over the course of today's race. We cut back on with the race leader looking here in the pit lane. His fellow McLaren, that being Flitzer Flop. We just heard the sound of that AMG V8 soar on past. That was the number 1 of Vladislav Mizin. Moves up to 8th. Lebay exits the pit lane in 7th. And as it stands, about 6 seconds up the road from Mizin. So a great pit stop by Lebay. He's held a pretty solid position on the track here. Given the fact that the drivers over the course of this race, we've lost a few of them, started to drop away like flies before the opening half. Now find ourselves only with 10 positions, and that's payday for pretty much any driver right now, no matter the skill bracket, because it's going to be 3 points across the board here. So Wright's fallen away quite a bit from that fight of being in the top 5. That's provisionally going to be towards the sort of top 7 by the end of this race. But he is still going to be able to pick up a solid little bit of points. And looking at Wright's points yields over the course of the last couple of rounds of the championship, we stay on board here with the 54 Porsche. And he was a late entry into the championship as it stands, but in the short time that he has been here, he's already made his way up to 13th place. Best result was 6th, worst result was 7th. So this is pretty on brand right now, consistently in that top 10 for Wright, and really this is only going to continue to open that record for the 54. Still yet to see considerations from any of the current front row sitters, Ota or Valorio, as to questions if they will come into the pit lane now as opposed to later. We can see here with Tom Wells, there may be the consideration coming up shortly because the gap between himself and Timo DeTosto, I have been paying a little bit of attention to that, is starting to wither. The Aston Martin is catching to the Ginetta. There may need to be that tactical pit stop just to give himself the edge over the 58 and the 32. He does not want to be caught up in that stampede up against the Astons. We see here with Anthony Valorio, the new race leader. if I had to say, and this is something that I actually spoke with Valorio himself about, because he's one of the higher ups for the High Caliber Community League. And we spoke about the notion of sort of making the TRTN Driver of the Day award a more official accolade, one that would be actually showcased at the end of each event alongside the official race results. Now, we do want to think long and hard about our choices now, because now it has some real grounds to play in. It is a bit of a tough one. I think what I'll have to do, I'm going to have to cross-reference some of the qualifying data, put it up against where the drivers are finishing. Moreover, who's been giving us some of the best shows here. So you definitely have these two in nominees for that, Diaz and Di Tosto, who follow each other into the pit lane. They've been almost symbiotic in their fight between the two Astons. Looking around the field as well, I mean, sizing up a few names here. Let's have a look. I would definitely say Wells. It's a case where Wells is punching well above his weight in that little Ginetta, and it's always a fun story to see a result like that. His best result of the season was 7th place at the round opener, the season opener, I should say, the opening round in Monza, and the chances right now sit for Wells to get a top 5. If he can play his cards right here and keep himself out of trouble. He's been given a bit of a Deus Ex here by that earlier run to the pit lane by the two Astons behind him. But what it does stress the importance of now is flooring it to the pit lane yourself, as to not be caught up in a strategic undercut. The 818, if he can play his cards right, would see a top 5, and that would be the first time Ginetta gets a top 5 in this championship. That is pretty easy driver of the day material, if I had to say so. Of course, we will get that official announcement towards the end of today's race. I'd say another driver who's definitely been quite an interesting show has been that of Flitzer. Had a great start to this race, up and ahead of Asahi Ota at one point. Was able to put on a pretty solid fight, all things considered. Ultimately dropped away from his fight to regain position off of Ota, and that was for the top 4. But he's had a great little performance indeed. Valorio stays out, as too does Asahi Ota, currently in the pit lanes, just exiting now. That's the 32 of Carlos Diaz. Lapped there by Valorio. A little bit of lag there as we cut on board with Carlos Diaz, now forfeiting to Asahi Ota. The gap between those two just in and around 2.6 seconds for the front row. I'd say definitely a likely nomination for Asahi Ota. He's had great defensive performance over the course of this race. It is textbook stuff from the 55. I'd say one of those sort of references I go back to quite a lot in my head when thinking about the do's and don'ts of a defending performance. I think Asahi Ota is one of those drivers that's got this nailed down to a very precise art. He knows when to pick his fights. I'd say it's a very rare occasion where he puts a foot wrong or puts himself in imminent danger in a defensive performance. He knows precisely how to gauge drivers. It's a methodical experience watching the 55 defend. LeBay could be looking here, and this is also something that would put him in the likely positions for driver of the day. Now, these are all just nominations, right? We'll get an actual driver of the day before the end of today's race, I assure you of that much. But we're sort of throwing ideas at the wall here, seeing what kind of works, what doesn't. And really, a lot of these have been quite compelling stories. I mean, you see as well with LeBay, he is on the chances here to hold the all-time win record in this championship. Currently, it's joint first between himself and Vladislav Mizin at 2 race wins in the GT4 challenge. He could be going for 3 on the trot, the first ever hat-trick victory we've seen in this championship. Now, as far as I'm led to believe, the GT4 challenge will return later down the line, but we've got some fun stuff coming up over the Christmas and winter period. I think it's coming up now. I can't confirm this, but I'm pretty sure I heard it was coming back in 2026. I'll have to chase up any notes on that, but it has been so far a fantastic championship, and I'd say it'd be a crime for it to go away. Yes, so I do have word here. It will be January at the earliest that the GT4 Challenge returns for Season 2. You see, into the pits now. In the meantime, is Valorio, Ota, and Wright all into the pits. So here comes Christian LeBay for what could be a hat-trick of overtakes on his way out of Ravazza. Is now leading this charge. The plucky little G55, the number 818 of Tom Wells, currently stands at the front of this race. Now the last driver left to take a pit stop. 25.5 minutes left to go. There is still a lot going on here in this race. Elite Cassie in chat asking, hello mate, were you covering the 6 hours of Zolder tonight? Absolutely. We've already had all of that signed off with our sponsors over at Malwar Transport. We'll be heading into the coverage of the championship live from 6 o'clock tonight, British summer time. It's going to be a fantastic championship coming up in the Console Endurance Series. We may actually very well see quite a few of the drivers in here. We know that Christian LeBay is actually part of the Malwar Racing team. Of course, he wears that MRT suffix and wears the colours of the Malwar Racing team. He'll be part of the all Bentley lineup. 3 cars, the 99, the 119 and the 616. He'll be in the 119 car in this championship. We'll also be seeing in the same car, I believe, is Timo Tosto. So those two will be competing in the Bentley later on today. It's going to be a great time for those two. Having a look around to see who else do I recognise that's going to be in that field. Sadly, I don't believe I do recognise any other drivers that are going to be on that grid. We do know as well that in one of the other major series we've been covering in the last couple of weeks, the HCCL Pro Series, you'll join us next for round 4 of the championship at Watkins Glen. We know that Anthony Valorio and Flitzer Flop both compete for the High Caliber Racing team, the motorsports wing of the High Caliber Community League. It's kind of a pity, I'd say, that we don't get to see them over on the Console Endurance Series. I would personally hope to see HCR make an appearance there. I think as a league representative team, they'd fit quite snugly into the pro category. Right now, back on board with Tom Wells. And he continues his charge up into lap 19, so he is not pulling the trigger on going into the pits just yet. The 818 is really taking the baton and has ran with it. He's trying absolutely everything here. I think what we're seeing with the intensity in this drive right now, I think this is among the last laps he takes before running to the pits, because he is flooring it now. This is close to what you'd see in qualifying. Of course, he's not sticking to a rhythm on this lap. You can see a little bit more of that intensity creeping in because he's throwing absolutely everything into these last couple of laps because he's trying to build that gap up. He may be intense, but it is not like feral. He's very calm when it comes to these laps. I've noticed that as well. He's got this sort of flow state style of driving that you don't see the car really seems to be under a lot of pressure in the way that it's sort of pitching and rolling into corners. Doesn't really ever seem to be too stressed, but it's just so precise there. And you saw that run through Alta. He didn't want to take either of the two curves because he knew ultimately he would just trim time in a car this small. We're down towards Ravazza. Could we be right in our assertions that this could be a pit lane run out of Wells, or is he going to go above and beyond on his current stint? On lap 19, does he look for the pit lane? Not this time around. So one does wonder. One really wants to pick the brain here of the 818. What is the method behind the madness of that 55, not the 55, the 818 G55 Ginetta of Tom Wells? Looking for where the nearest fights on track are concerned, it's Wright v De Tosto for 7th place. The Aston Martin looking at the inside on his way to Piratella. Now, we've seen already that De Tosto is a very measured customer when it comes to taking positions. We saw his move on Diaz earlier in this race, and really what he does is he sticks himself on the inside. He forces the other driver to either try to defend or, well, it's defend or die trying, really, is the modus operandi. We see turned around, though. That was right. Let's get a look at that as the incident there. Is that, I wouldn't really attribute any kind of malice to that. I mean, you look at an incident like this, Tosto's held all the way to the outside, and it's just the shallower of the lines. He's already off track by the time he makes contact with the 54. In my mind, that's a racing incident, and it's definitely come much to the chagrin of Wright, who right now is behind De Tosto, down in 8th place. To me, I think that's the calmest I've ever been about an incident like that, because even I could tell from the terrible camera angles that we get here down towards Aqua Minerale that was pretty clear-cut a racing incident. A shallower line, it was just a recipe for disaster. It's a very narrow section of the track. It is possible to get too wide down through there, but as you can see, it does not come without extraordinary risk. Another nearby fight, Valorio v Ota for 4th place on the grid. Mizin now back up to 3rd with the fastest lap. The only driver left, the final puzzle piece in the grand conundrum of racing here at round 6 of the GT4 Challenge, is Tom Wells. On his way towards lap 21, does he finally take the run to the pit lane? No, he's going to go long. So the longest strategy I think we've seen for quite some time here out of Wells. He's 35 seconds down the road from Christian Lebay. Now, these pit stop times take in and around the range, I want to say, of about 45 seconds to a minute. So he is going to drop back quite a ways here. I'm predicting he may even fall into, I'd say, just outside of that top 5 right now. He would put him on for his best result, though. His best result this season has been 7th. And this would be a promotion to 6th. But he will have to fight tooth and nail with Flitzer Flop every step of the way. That could be a very exciting one from here. He was being chased down by quite a handful of British machines, namely being Timo de Tosto and Carlos Diaz before his run into the pit lane. So Wells stays out. Lebay in a comfortable position on track at the moment. 6 seconds on the last interval up the road from Vladislav Mizin. Anthony Valorio is still only just a second or so away from Asahi Ota at the best of times at this stint. 19 minutes and a half left to go in round 6 of the championship. Flitzer Flop not too far away either. Timo de Tosto, we saw him get up and ahead of Wright. Sure, there will definitely be words between the pair of them, but at least from our point of view, and this is not the official judgment of the situation from anything HCCL side, this is just our view of it. That looked pretty clear cut as to be a sort of racing incident there. I don't think either of those two drivers wanted that to happen, or were going out of their way to say, you know, oh, if you don't move over, this is what's going to happen. I don't think they were forcing each other into that move. It's just the consequence of close side-by-side racing. You can't always have it perfectly. But they've gotten back going. They've dusted themselves off, picked themselves up by the bootstraps, and got back to work, so it seems. So with 18, just under 19 minutes left to go, we see here Ota slowly drawing ground to Anthony Valorio in 4th place. Looking up the road, Lebay at this time at 30-odd seconds from Tom Wells. Looking precisely, it's 34.2 seconds as Wells stays out onto lap 22. It is quite remarkable how far he's willing to draw the line on this stint. Wells still leads here. He's our 3rd race leader after Lebay and Valorio. Let's get on board with this fight here. Actually, as Asahi Ota, yeah, so he's drawing time in to actually, no, hang on a second. Was it not the other way around, where Valorio was behind Asahi Ota? So what on earth happened there for the 55? Or I think I genuinely might be going insane here, folks. I really don't know what else to tell you. You know what? Hang on. Give me a second. This is how we'll figure it out. No? Okay, so it was always the case. We can literally see the standings there. It was always the case. That's, I'm going to have to do it again. I'm going to have to do it again. This is the problem when you stream so many times in a week. Right, yes, so Valorio from Ota. Okay, so it's always been that case. And this is what happens when you stream multiple times a week. You slowly, but surely, go insane. And that's kind of what's gone on there. So, Ota drawing in time to Valorio. 1.2 seconds as it stands right now on the way up to Piratella. You can see over the... We cut there to... That was Timo de Tosto we just cut to. So you look over the rear view, you can see it's hovering in and around that sort of, I'd say, 5 to 6 car length gap at its widest there between Ota and Valorio. Meanwhile, we can actually see up the road, if we were to go and check in with the resident Ginetta. The 818 is into the pit lane, so this is how is it going to impact the rest of the field is the real question here. Wells has stayed out for quite some time. He's not even come to a stop in his pit lane yet, and already we see Christian Lebay rounding Ravazza on his way to turn 19. So the race lead's definitely not going to stay with Wells. The question is, where does he emerge from the pit lane? As you can see, it's a very tight spread of cars from 1st all the way down to 6th. So Wells down to 2nd. Mizin goes up to 2nd, then ahead of Wells. Wells down to 3rd. Then comes Valorio and Ota. Then Flop. So our predictions were a little bit spotty there. He actually emerges behind Flop. But it could even be a case where if he can't get a wriggle on here, he might find himself in the iron sights of Timo de Tosto. Fortunately, he is off the jacks. So actually, no, our predictions were spot on. It was 6th. I think there was the hopes there that he could have emerged to fight alongside Flitzer Flop. But that's definitely been crushed there for the 818. But with 15 minutes left to go, Tom Wells is looking at his new best result this season. Flitzer-Floppy's up to the top 5. Sahiota still, relatively speaking, close to Valorio, albeit in the last lap there. He has slowly bled time. About 0.6 of a second, actually, he's lost over the course of the last 2 sectors to Anthony Valorio in the 41. Then looking further around the field to see where our nearest fights are. Really, all you'd be looking is in the stakes here between Ota and Valorio. That's at 1.7 seconds. You can't really call that much of a battle at this time. They're kind of chipping away at each other's times here, hoping one folds before the other. 15 minutes left to go. It could be a quieter exit to round 6 of the championship. Of course, next round coming up will be the penultimate round, round 7 at the Hungaroring, and then the season finale in 2 weeks' time at the Red Bull Ring. We'll stay on board with Asahi Ota and his continued efforts to try and catch up to the 41 of Anthony Valorio. We'll be back in just a moment's time. As we cut back on board with Asahi Ota, we do note there the yellow flags have come out for the first time in a blue moon here in Imola. Trouble for the 54 of Wright on the exit of the Varianti Villeneuve. He now drops behind Diaz. That is quite a remarkable turn of fate here for Wright. Fortunately, he'll still be able to preserve that record of being inside the top 10 at every single race he's appeared in so far, but this is maybe a result to forget for today. The 54 right now down to 9th behind Carlos Diaz. We're back in the green flag conditions. Fortunately, no major damage in whatever did happen for the 54 at this time, but there's definitely been a clear knock to his confidence. So the 818 of Tom Wells stares upon the chances of his new best result of the season. It's definitely likely to put him in that performance for driver of the day, just on account of the fact that he has been able to do what he's been able to do in the Ginetta of all vehicles. It is a tough one. I will say that it is a very, very tough one to give you a definitive answer on who is driver of the day here at round 6 of the HCCL GT4 Challenge. There's a lot of candidates here. There's a lot of talent to be spoken about. There's a lot of likely candidates. Right now, that gap between Valorio and Ota is hemorrhaging there. From 1 second when we cut away from him, it's now about 3 seconds between Valorio and Ota. It's actually more likely to see Flitzer flop fight with the Aston Martin than the Aston Martin a fight with his fellow McLaren. Those three find themselves in en passant, though. 3 seconds either side of it from the point of view of the 55. 11 minutes left to go. It could be a much quieter end to what is otherwise going to be record-breaking stuff here for the race leader. We'll stay on board, though, with Carlos Diaz, as he's now become part of the new nearest fight on track. That's between himself and the 54 of Wright. and the Porsche 718. Let's stay on board with Diaz. Currently defending that 8th position that he's managed to get up over the 54 over the course of this race. Now, discussing Diaz's results over the course of the championship, we take a look back here through the championship standings. Carlos Diaz 16th in the championship. He is staring upon, much like with Tom Wells, his best result of the season, 8th place. Previous results was 12th, 14th, 16th and 15th. So I'd say Diaz has very quietly snuck himself into a pick of driver of the day here. He's alongside Tom Wells as the most likely candidates to be selected for that award today, because Diaz is definitely been getting quite the wriggle on here. He had quite a few fights over the course of today. He fought with Timo de Tosto, now 16.5 seconds up the road here. But Diaz has stayed with, and now, for his efforts, is able to defend against Wright. Could he be staring upon the best chance of a brand new best result of the championship? And moreover, this is Diaz's first top 10 appearance in this championship. So the chances are very, very likely there for Carlos Diaz. I mean, right now, we'll stay on board with Carlos Diaz. As a matter of fact, what we're going to do, we're going to leave it up to the viewers in chat. We've got a few candidates here that I'm going to list in an upcoming poll, and I'm very curious to see who you think driver of the day ought to be. Right now, you can see that that gap has quickly fallen away there for Wright to fight back there against Carlos Diaz. So we'll cut away from these two as we now cut on board with Asahi Ota. So we're going to run that for the next sort of 5 minutes here. So poll's open for 5 minutes. You can interact with that in the chat. We'll take that as a rough guess as to who is really in that position for driver of the day. We do have a few ideas in the back of our minds here. We've thrown a few of them into the ring to see who the viewers at home seem to think the best results are. On board with Lebay, leading that charge now by 6.5 seconds to Vladislav Mizin. The chances to be the first ever hat-trick victory in the history of the GT4 Challenge definitely sits in front of him here. The 119, 7.5 minutes to go, stands upon the chances of making history as the first ever to do so. Vladislav Mizin has been a pretty consistent all-rounder in this race, but is stuck rather precariously in second over the course of round 6. We've seen already votes coming in for Wells, and it's not hard to see where that's coming from. The fact that he is now looking upon his new best result, his first since the opening round of the championship. Also here in Italy, over at the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza, it was 7th place for the 818, I should say. Nearly said the 616. That is the number of Andrew Veldkamp. No, for the 818 was his best result back in Monza. Now stands upon the chances of not only a new best result, but a first of his top 6 appearances. For Flitzer Flop, I mean, he's been a phenomenal driver over the course of today's race. He's been very, very lively to watch. He's had quite a lot of fun, and we've had quite a lot of fun watching his runabout here in Imola. And also to speak as well of one of the drivers that's inside of those nominations, Asahi Ota. I mean, it's just crystal clear performance when it comes to that defense. He's started in 4th place and right now looks to be finishing in 4th place, and no one has been able to challenge his tenure for it. Vladislav, actually, I want to put this out. Vladislav Mizin did start actually 3rd in this race. It is up to 2nd. See now votes also coming in for Christian Lebay, and I believe could be seeing quite a lot of support there for the 119. Right now stands in the balance between Wells and Lebay for that driver of the day vote. You can see here, this is the new driver on the block, Elias Federico de Sabato, the number 10. And now all fair play to him. He did get back out on track there. He got turned around at the start of the race down at the Variante Villeneuve, but he got back out on track. Has actually outlived some of his opponents on this track here and has found his way into a top 10. So really nothing to scoff at there for the BMW. A great little turnaround for him. He'll end today on a relatively high note, knowing that he was still in the top 10. 5 minutes left to go here in Imola. Ooh, so cutting around the field, not really an awful lot left to discuss here. A lot of the drivers have now spread quite thinly around the track in the slow dance to the line here. 4.5 minutes left to go. We're on board with Flitzer Flop. 2.5 seconds from Asahi Ota. Anthony Valorio also 2.5 seconds from the road of Asahi Ota. So again, these three drivers are stuck in a very long-winded concertina. When one pushes, the other gets pushed forward into the other, and it's sort of like a Newton's cradle, if you had to imagine. One side indirectly affects the other. For Valorio, though, I don't think he'll be arguing with another podium appearance. I mean, looking at his results over the course of the last couple of rounds of the championship, he's 7th overall, and his last 3 results were all top 10 appearances. His best result coming out of Snetterton, where he finished on the podium. This will be his 2nd podium appearance of the season. So for the 41, he's on that procession up towards a top 5 by the end of the championship. Right now in front of him are 2 drivers in that championship that aren't right now on this track, that being Manuel Verzi and Matthew Copsey. So the positions lay bare for the taking for the 41. So this is real payday for Anthony Valorio. 3.5 minutes left to go. The driver of the day vote is nearly at a close here for round 6. And if it ends up on a tie, we'll have to try and sort of decide it for ourselves here. We've left it up to the viewers at home right now, just quickly having a check-in on that. As it comes to a close, it is looking to swing quite heavily in favour of Tom Wells, 67% to 33% in the opinion polls right now. The poll has ended, so your driver of the day for this race is going to be Tom Wells in the 818 Ginetta. 3 minutes left to go then here in Imola. We can see things are starting to warm up between Ota and Valorio. I think a lot of the intensity starting to ramp up from the 55, maybe sticking around in the background as to not overcook himself in time for this final push stint. 1.5 seconds and closing between the 41 and the 55. We could yet still end this event on a livelier note. Valorio now definitely under a little bit of siege here. He has dropped away quite a bit of time over the last lap there, entering lap 30 from lap 29. He's now down to 1.3 seconds between himself and Asahi Ota. Let's get on board with the Aston Martin, because there is definitely one more chapter to play out here in Imola. 2 minutes left to go. We'll be functionally entering our final lap in a moment's time, courtesy of the 119. So it would be one more opportunity for Ota to claim the podium here in Imola. The chances are still absolutely there for the Japanese talent in the 55. As you can see right in front of him, not too far up the road, is the 41 in an increasingly vulnerable position here. Something is awry for Anthony Valorio. The car is massively dropping away in terms of performance. It's either that or it's Asahi Ota has suddenly woken up out of his slumber in the last couple of minutes. As you can see, he's drawing in that gap remarkably fast. We are absolutely now looking at the fight for third, and it will carry over the course of this lap here. We'll be rounding things out on the start of lap 32. However, we're on to the final lap here, lap 31 of today's race. Across the line goes Valorio and Ota in the last lap. They're half a second faster in favour of the 55. The 41, though, has definitely opened the taps on the McLaren. He's up to 1 second between the pair as he makes his way down through the Variante Tamburello. We're still on board with Asahi Ota. You can see it is all hands on deck for Aston Martin to try and claim a podium in today's race. On their way down towards the Variante Villeneuve, can still see up the road, just faintly in the distance, that number 1 Mercedes of Vladislav Mizin. Looks like another easy front row finish there, starting from 3rd up to 2nd. Good positive results for Mizin, but he will be still losing out on that gap in the championship standings. For Asahi Ota, this is the worst case scenario because he's still numerically within the chance of the championship. He'll be that all the way to the end at Red Bull Ring, but he wants to stay as close as possible as to give himself the best chance coming into Hungaroring and Red Bull Ring. We'll be catching on board with the 119 of Christian Lebe in a moment's time. Asahi Ota still in pursuit here. The chances are still on the table for him to come and have a go for a move, but it is going to take an absolutely lightning offensive from the 55. So as we close out what looks to be a very lively end right at the very last second here of round 6 of the championship, we're going to cut on board away from Asahi Ota over to Christian Lebe as he exits Ravazza on what looks to be the trails of history-making performance here. The checkered flag flies to receive the 119, not once, not twice, but 3 times in a row. Down to the line goes Christian Lebe, who wins in Imola. Fantastic stuff then for the 119, 3 on the trot, the first ever hat-trick in the history of the GT4 Challenge. Vladislav Mizin to the line with the fastest lap and in 2nd place. Then across the line comes Anthony Valorio. Had it been one more lap, he could have seen side by side there with the Aston Martin of Asahi Ota. The two finish only half a second from one another on that 2nd row, 3rd and 4th. Flitzer Flop to the line in 5th place, and coming to the line in a moment's time, making his way down through Ravazza, our driver of the day, the 818 Tom Wells with Ginetta. We'll get the full results in a moment's time, as I believe there Vladislav Mizin left the session. So we'll get the full results. I believe this is, yes, 6th place for Tom Wells. So by proxy, 7th for Di Tosto, 8th for Diaz, and 9th for Wright, 10th for De Sabato. We'll get the full results up on the left-hand side of your screen in a moment's time once all drivers have crossed the line. We see here Timo De Tosto coming to the line on what is going to be, I believe, 7th place, as mentioned before. A great result for the 58. Diaz also on an extraordinary result on his way to the line there, still up and ahead of Wright. He's in 8th place when the checkered flag drops. So that is his new best result of the season, his first top 10 appearance. And what a result there for Diaz. 8th place, so you can see the full result. Christian Lebe wins in Imola, 3rd on the trot in terms of victories. The first ever hat-trick in the history of the HCCL GT4 Challenge goes to the 119. Vladislav Mizin in 2nd, Anthony Valorio 3rd, Asahi Ota 4th, Flitzer Flop 5th, Tom Wells, driver of the day, and 6th. Timo De Tosto 7th, Carlos Diaz on his new best result of the season in 8th, ahead of Wright in 9th, De Sabato on debut in 10th. 2 DNFs there, Gabriele Diada and Cam Walker, 11th and 12th. Well, what a drive that has been. Looking into the paddock there, here is your race winner, the 119 of Christian Lebe. 3 in a row now. You'll be very, very happy with that one. And opening the taps up even further on his championship lead over Vladislav Mizin. Now, just to double check the scorings and run a quick calculation right off the bat here. So there is an additional point for the fastest lap. That's gone to Vladislav Mizin. That gives him 28 points over Lebe's 32. So from where it was 7 points between the pair, plus 4 gives you an 11-point lead coming into the Hungaroring for the penultimate round of the championship. And speaking of, looking at when that'll be on October 25th, same time next week, and then heading to the Red Bull Ring the week after for the season finale. It can only be one by one here in the HCCL GT4 Challenge, and there are still a few more chapters left to play out before we crown a champion. So that's all from us here on TRTN. It's going to be a lively day. If you're joining us later on, we'll be covering the opening round, the 6 hours of Zolder for the NLRL Console Endurance Series Season 2, our 2nd season of endurance racing with them, one of the biggest endurance championships on console. Do look forward to that. That's all from us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Goodbye.